Athens City Council. It's Monday, May 16th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Tonight we're in regular session, and we will begin with establishing a quorum. All members of council are present. We'll next have the disposition of minutes for the regular session of council held on May 2nd, 2022. If I could have a motion for their approval.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes have been approved. Thank you. Communications. Do we have any communications from council members? Okay, not. Then we'll move on to reports and communications from other elected officials. Law Director Eliason.
No.
Mayor Patterson.
President Nicely, the only thing I have for this evening is just a reminder to City Council that the Ohio Municipal League is having a regional conference. It's going to be, not June, it's going to be May 20th. It'll be over at the OUN, and I believe there's still time to register. I would strongly encourage council members who have the time to attend that particular conference, because typically the OML has their main conference up in the Columbus area. Of late, they've started having these regional conferences, which is great because attendance for those in the region really goes up. We see people from villages and cities that might not otherwise be able to afford the time or the cost to go up to the OML conference in Columbus. And so I encourage council to do that. Just to give you an idea, there will be a legislative update, but then there's some topics that are worth mentioning to all of you: ethics, public records management, home rule, and local control, which I think is going to be a hot topic. And then cybersecurity and economic development are some of their agenda or the conference program items. So again, strongly encourage council to consider that. And then also the International Town Gown Associations Conference, which will be the 6th through the 8th of June in Clemson. I know that Director Catherine Ann Jordan is going to be attending that with me. I'll be going as I transition to become the president of ITGA, so I would encourage council members to go. There's a lot to learn at the International Town Gown Association Conference, and I know that President Nicely has attended several times, as have other council members, so I encourage you to consider that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move on now. We have ordinances for third reading and second reading and first reading tonight. So we'll begin with the ordinances for third reading. 5722 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to close Union Street between Court and College for the Athena Ride for Women and to change or cancel the requested date as necessary. And this is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 5722.
Second. Okay.
You've already read the title. Let me just read the section. Section 1, the Service Safety Director shall implement the following. A, close to vehicular traffic, Union Street between Court and College no earlier than 4 p.m. and no later than 10 p.m. and maintain cross traffic wherever practicable for the Athena Ride for Women motorcycle event on August 12, 2022. B, ban parking on Union Street between Court and College no earlier than 3 a.m. and no later than 10 p.m. on August 12, 2022 to accommodate said event. Thank you.
We have a motion and second for approval of this. Do we have any questions or comments from council members, other elected officials, anybody in our audience? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 5822 is an ordinance authorizing the 2022 street paving and repairs project number 352, and this is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 5822.
Second.
Allow me to read the pertinent sections to remind everyone what we're doing. The Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to accept bids and enter into contracts with the lowest and best bidder for 2022 street paving and repairs project number 352. Section 2, the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 150-21 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums: $250,000 to Street Fund 220 Transaction Code 500 and $250,000 to Street Rehabilitation Fund 572, Transaction Code 500, and increasing the total appropriations by said amount. Section 3, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to spend up to $500,000 as follows: $250,000 from Street Fund 220, Transaction Code 500, and $250,000 from Street Rehabilitation Fund 572, Transaction Code 500, for said paving and repairs.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of 5822. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Swank.
I have two, and it's primarily for the administration. In general, how do we define best bid? And specifically for a project like this, what would constitute a best bid? Probably should have asked this back in January on the first one of these, but this just dawned on me.
Best bid would be, a good example to give you, I guess, would be a company that within that bid is able to capture all the streets. And I'll also throw this out there with an ounce of caution as well. We have certainly engaged with a number of street repaving firms. And so, historically, we have experienced a lot of those who are putting the bids in, but, typically it's the lowest bid that comes in. I would say that most of the paving companies that we've had working in the city have done an outstanding job, so I'm not defining it, I'm sure, the way that you would like for it to be defined, but it's someone that is providing us everything that we are asking for within that bid itself.
So I guess, and that is a good answer, I appreciate that. In some cases, generally speaking, do we have a matrix or matrices that, a scoring system, I guess, for certain things? Do we use that sometimes? Well,
we do in terms of the documents that are provided to us. We've had bids that have come in for different street repaving projects and projects, period, that didn't put forth a full and complete bid package, and therefore they won't qualify. If they don't have the bond statement in there, then they won't qualify. So that's the check. We sit there and check to make sure that all the documents that are requested for any bid, but we're talking about street repaving, So for that, as long as they've got everything and provided all the information that's required by us.
And it's a fairly rigorous process. I mean, as I've observed, because sometimes I've needed to sit in either for the mayor or somebody else and witness it. And so the staff are there and witnesses and the mayor and the service safety director to make sure that all of those documents are in place. And so it's fairly extensive. So it's not just the price.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments from our council members, elected officials, or our audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. The next ordinance is 5922. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title I, General Provisions, Chapter 1.03, Code Fees Established, to add Section 7.05.03.1D, Application Fee for Residential Parking Permit, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt 59-22.
Second.
Madam President, you've already done a wonderful job of reading essentially the entire ordinance just in the title. The only thing left for me to add would just be the section referred to, Section 7.05.03.1D, Residential Parking Permit, Annual Application Fee, $40.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I love the descriptive titles. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from council members? Yes, Councilmember Swank.
Following social media, the fact that we have this seems to be the great mystery in this town. If you were to go out on the street and poll people, I think you might find 2 in 10 that know we have a 72-hour thing. I know it's not in the ordinance, but I'm hoping that we can expand our efforts to to not promote this, but to explain it, to share it, because if I read one Facebook page about somebody getting towed, which is way more than $40, that's one too many. So I hope we can, administration, get it in the appropriate places. Maybe, I don't know, if we maybe add it one time as a message on the utility bill.
Yes, Mayor Patterson,
I mean,
yes.
that would be, certainly worth looking into to put on the utility bill, but, if you're like me, I don't know that I've ever looked at the comment box in the bottom of my utility bill other than pay my utility bill. But no, point well taken. I have had a conversation with Scott Thompson and looking at creating something that is right there, easy to grab on the on the city's website, to where it's services, and basically listing all the different services, because I heard the same things, that I didn't know that there was a 72-hour permit out there. Hopefully, for everyone who's watching tonight, they will, but we can do a better job of making sure we provide services that might be at this of great benefit to our citizens, where it's easy to find. Right now, it's not easy. The place to go looking for it, oddly enough, is to go, if you're having trouble sleeping at night, reading through Athens City Code and find it. And that's not an effective way to get information out.
Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, Member President Isley. I'd like to ask Member Swank, why are people getting towed?
If you park in one spot for 24 hours,
You don't get ticketed?
you get ticketed.
So isn't that a reminder to you that you've done something? Maybe you should look into what
It's not me. I park in my driveway.
I know, I'm just saying for the general public.
Yeah.
It shouldn't get to the point where you're being towed, right?
Right, and-
Ticket, I understand.
And there are also people who visit town and things of that. But the mayor's point is well taken. It's a service that we're providing. And, not everybody reads the paper. Not everybody watches this TV. And, it's a lot of people worked very, very hard to get this thing passed. We tried the pilot first and then rolled it out to the whole city. And supposedly this is what people wanted. So we've delivered, and let's just take the final step. And plus it's revenue for the city, which we can certainly use.
Oh, I'm all for it.
Councilmember Spielness.
Yes, along with that, because I shared the same concern, is that the way that it's done has been rather complicated, and we had talked about that. So the possibility of being able to pay for it online and pick it up in an easy way or have it mailed to you, we've talked about streamlining that process, and I'm wondering if there's any progress on that.
Oh, I can check on the progress. I mean, it has certainly been mentioned to utility billing, it's not utility billing, over at the parking enforcement with the police department. It is a convoluted process, I get that, where you've got checks and balances on the police department side, on the code office side, and then finally an outcome, so we'll work on that. It's not rocket science to get the store streamlined.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping, so thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 6020 is our next one, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Development Services Agency for any eligible community development block grant, CDBG program funds for program year 2022, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. Yes, so Ordinance 6022, I would like to make a motion that we accept and approve. Thank you. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit an application and enter into an agreement. As you just heard, Section 1 from that ordinance reads that the mayor is hereby authorized to submit an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Development Services Agency for an eligible community development block grant program funds for the program year 2022. We appreciate any opportunity to look for supplemental funds, so I would like to absolutely encourage us to support this.
Okay. And we have had one public hearing. We'll be having one other one as we narrow the possibility for the projects and the different programs to which we'll be applying. So that second public hearing will be coming up. So we have motion and second. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 6122 is an ordinance amending the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance and amending Ordinance 1722 to increase the authorized expenditure for structural repairs to the Athens Fire Department headquarters. This is project number 343, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. I would like to make a motion that we approve 6122.
Second.
Thanks. Getting ahead of myself, this is a topic that has been on our agendas for some time, and we have discovered that there are additional need for repairs. As previously discussed, our headquarters is very important, so I would like to encourage folks to support this.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of 6122. Any comments or questions from council members, other elected officials, or the audience? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 6222 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 9, General Regulations, Chapter 3.03, Fireworks, Explosives, and Inflammables, Section 3.03.03, Sale and Use of Fireworks, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. I would like to move that we adopt 6222. There we go.
Second.
All right, so we've discussed fireworks in a couple of different ways. First, with regard to definitions, and the revised code is very clear that we're talking about big fireworks displays, not wanting that to happen within city limits without approval. This does not apply to things like sprinklers. So there's lots of detailed language available in the revised code, but I would like to encourage folks to support this safety measure.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval. Any comments or questions? Council members, elected officials, or our audience? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 6322 is an ordinance opting out of House Bill 172 and reaffirming the ban on discharging, igniting, or exploding fireworks in the city of Athens, as set forth in Athens City Code Chapter 9.03, Fireworks, Explosives, and Inflammables, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. I would like to move that we approve 6322.
Second.
Again, this is a safety measure. We want to make sure that we are taking care of people and property by maintaining our ban of use of fireworks within city limits without approval. That's all.
Okay. And we have a motion and second for the approval. Do we have any comments or questions from council members, elected officials, or our audience? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 6422 is an ordinance granting a special right-of-way use permit to Rockstar LLC owner in care of Brent Hartman, 67 Columbus Road, to allow 27 parking spaces for use by the Ohio Valley Museum, introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 6422.
Second.
Thank you. So this does nearly exactly what the title states, but there are some details included in the ordinance. And this, basically speaking, allows for the Ohio Valley Museum of Discovery to pave an existing parking lot that is a portion of which is within the city right-of-way. And we do have language in the ordinance that states that, the city does not accept responsibility for any damages that might happen as a result of this installation, and it does include some specific conditions such that access to 197 North Lancaster Street through the parking area will be allowed, and that this is a special right-of-way permit, and it will be in effect for a maximum of 7 years unless it is revoked, and that Rockstar LLC shall be responsible for the maintenance of this right-of-way.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Councilmember Swank.
Do we have any sort of a timeline on when they hope to complete this project?
I do know that they're in the middle of their capital campaign. So I don't know that they have a firm timeline in which to have the museum built out and open to the kids, but hopefully soon, because it's a long drive to the nearest children's museum. Logan, I think, is the closest one to Athens. So, not that that's a long drive, but this is going to be great when this is finally built out.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from elected officials or our audience members? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 6522 is an ordinance accepting a certificate of registration from Windstream Kentucky Data Link for use of the city's right-of-way and is introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Isley. And this, just according to Title 49, when a utility company accesses or uses a portion of the city right-of-way, they must be registered with the city. And Windstream Kentucky Data Link has filled out the certificate of registration, and this is our process for accepting that certificate.
Okay, so you're making a motion to
Yes,
approve.
make a motion that we approve this
Okay,
ordinance.
thank you.
Second.
And a second. Okay. We have a motion and second. Do we have any comments or questions from council members, elected officials, or our audience? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 6622 is an ordinance amending the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 15021 and authorizing the auditor to make an interfund transfer. This is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 6622.
Second.
I'll go ahead and read the pertinent sections here. This ordinance mainly deals with some utility costs and annual insurance premiums, but I'll go ahead and read the sections. The 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 15021 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums: $2,500 to general fund for transfer, $2,360 to the cemetery fund for insurance and utility costs, $100 to CDBG Formula Grant Fund for insurance costs, $4,200 to the Recreation Fund for insurance costs, and $45,000 to ARPA Fund 286 for the Sunday Creek Horizons per Ordinance 3222, and increasing the total appropriations by said amounts. Section 2, the auditor is hereby authorized to make the following inter-fund transfer from the general fund to the Armory Hudson Fund in the amount of $2,500. And Section 3, the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 15021 is further amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the sum of $2,500 to the Armory Hudson Fund for utility costs. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and second. Do we have any other questions or comments from council members, elected officials, or our audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 6722 is an ordinance approving a memorandum of understanding with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, Local 3351, Ohio Council 8, AFL-CIO Union, amending Article 24, Command Pay, and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 6722.
Second.
As discussed for quite some time now regarding Service Safety Director and Fire Chief's requests to reorganize the staffing at the Athens Fire Department. This is an MOU with the union specifically about command pay. And I'll go ahead and read Section 1. The mayor is hereby authorized to execute a memorandum of understanding with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 3351, amending Article 24, Command Pay, a copy of which is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Do we have any questions or comments from council members? And if none, any from our elected officials or our audience members? Okay. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 6922 is an ordinance amending certain sections of Ordinance 14221, the 2022 Fringe Benefits Package for non-union personnel within the City of Athens. This is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 6922.
Second.
This goes along with the previous ordinance in terms of reorganizing the fire department staff. Section 1 reads, the following sections of Ordinance 142-21, the 2022 Fringe Benefits Package, are amended: 2 overtime, 4 vacations, 10 clothing allowance, 11 sick leave, and 18 additional types of leaves are hereby amended to read as attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval. Do we have any questions or comments from council members, elected officials, or our audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 7022 is an ordinance authorizing the auditor to conduct an amnesty program to encourage the payment of delinquent income tax accounts and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 70-22.
Second.
Thank you. As discussed and presented by the auditor, this is an opportunity for people in the City of Athens to pay delinquent income tax amounts that are due without penalty. And I'll go ahead and read the whereases of this ordinance. Whereas the City of Athens Income Tax Department believes that an amnesty program for delinquent income tax accounts would benefit the city, and whereas the amnesty program would begin on June 1st, 2022, and end on June 30th, 2022, and upon the taxpayer's request, grant a 1-week grace period before and after the amnesty period. And whereas the amnesty program provides an opportunity to educate the City of Athens taxpayers about their civic responsibilities under the City of Athens Income Tax Ordinance. And whereas the amnesty program allows taxpayers an opportunity to resolve their delinquent income tax accounts without penalty. And whereas in order to provide for the usual daily operations of the City of Athens Income Tax Department for the payment of delinquent income tax accounts, it is necessary that this ordinance take effect immediately. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of this new, or are reinstituting the amnesty program and collection of delinquent income taxes. Do we have any questions or comments from council members, elected officials, or our audience members? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 7122 is an ordinance authorizing an agreement with the City of Cleveland, Ohio for services relating to the collection of income tax, introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 71-22.
Second.
Thank you. Again, connected to the amnesty program just approved. This is, as the title reads, an agreement with the City of Cleveland. And I'll go ahead and read the whereas and section 1. Whereas the City of Cleveland is authorized to enter into an agreement with other municipal corporations to act as their agent as a central collection facility for the collection of income tax and to do all things allowed by law to accomplish such purpose. And whereas this council finds it to be in the best interest of the City of Athens to enter into an agreement to allow the City of Cleveland to act as an agent for administration of the income tax laws of the City of Athens and collection of income tax due and owing to the City of Athens. And whereas such administration and collection shall be restricted to delinquency issues referred to the City of Cleveland by the City of Athens, including pursuit of non-filled tax returns and other delinquency programs as agreed to between the City of Cleveland and the City of Athens. Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1, the city auditor is hereby authorized to enter into an agreement for the collection of municipal income tax with the City of Cleveland on behalf of the City of Athens. to allow the city of Cleveland to act as an agent for the purpose of administering income tax laws of the city of Athens and collecting income tax due and owed to the city of Athens. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second for approval of this ordinance, 7122. Are there any questions or comments from council members, elected officials, or our audience? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We next have a series of ordinances for second reading. I will read through those and pause briefly to see if anybody has any comments or questions. I'm not aware of any suspensions that we have for tonight, so we'll mainly be reading the titles so they've gone through the required second reading. 6822 is an ordinance amending the 2022 staffing levels and pay grades authorized by Ordinance 14121 and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee. And do we have any comments or questions? If none, we'll move on to 7222. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise and accept bids for construction and construction engineering of the city-county sewer expansion, project number 317, and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by Councilmember McCary. Comments or questions?
I do have a quick question.
Yes,
actually.
Councilmember Spielness.
Thank you, President Nicely. So I know that the construction's already going on, or at least my neighbors seem to think so. So I'm wondering, is this an additional thing, or?
I believe this is within the city limits. So we have a city sewer system, the county has a county, an
Right.
expansion of the new county system, and we have a hookup that's within the city limits.
Okay, so
And this
that's
is what we're
talking about
authorizing,
right
is the
there. Okay, I
hookup.
just wanted to double check because people are asking me and I'm going,
Yep.
okay.
Yep, so it's the
confusing me
hookup
a
for
little
it to allow that expanded sewer.
All right, great. I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, if not, we'll move on to 7322. An ordinance amending the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 15021 and Ordinance 5421, authorizing wastewater remote site telemetry improvements, project number 339, introduced by Councilmember McCary. And any comments or questions? If not, we'll move on to 7422. This is an ordinance authorizing construction and construction engineering of slip repair on the Bikeway Spur between Armitage Road and University Estates Boulevard. This is project number 348, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Any comments or questions? Councilmember Swank.
Since first reading on this, I've had the opportunity to visit this site on 2 occasions and have basically a series of timeline questions. And the questions are based on the principle of trying to establish responsibility for our current situation. So I guess I would defer to the chair as the best way to pursue this line of questioning this evening, so that we don't get clear down to the third reading and bog things down.
And you do have a series of questions that
Yes.
you wish to ask?
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess the first question would be, we're talking about endangered water lines and electric lines. When were those first installed? Do we know what year that happened?
I don't off the top of my head. It was part of the UE development when that
Way
took
back
place.
then.
Long time ago.
Okay, and when those were first installed, were they on that base, or on that current path, or basically on that current path?
Basically, and
Yeah.
I say basically because they did have to be moved.
Which would lead to the next question, when were they moved?
Gosh, I want to say within the past couple of years they were moved. I could get you a firm date as to when they were moved, unless Councilmember
Councilmember Spielness looks like she might have an answer because she's been investigating some of this, yes.
Yeah, well, okay. I have, as I've expressed in previous meeting, I'm concerned about this, and it's really bothered me to see it deteriorate so badly. So I have spent some time with Director of EPW and Jessica, and Jeff Reisner was there, toured with us to look at it. We have documentation showing the specific timeline, which of course I'd be happy to share with you so you can see this specifically. I haven't memorized exactly the dates, perhaps Councilmember Reisner has, but essentially in 2019, there were, oh gosh, it's such a long story. Okay, so how do I shorten this a bit? In essence, the process of putting the bike path in, and I'm sure it's too bad that Jessica isn't here to clarify this, but in essence, when there were problems that came up, and part of it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember.
You're doing fine.
Okay. When they did the test borings, they thought things were okay prior to this process. But then when they dug it up for the bike path, there was hillside seepage, which is usual in this particular geological place. And Councilmember Reisner is an expert on geology, so he can expand on this if you like.
We got an hour.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to try to abbreviate this as much as possible. My understanding is that there was they did experience these problems, and which I observed. So as they arose, and Jessica was putting notes together on what she observed, they tried various ways of fixing it. So there were, and not to go into the whole thing, but in essence, they tried what was financially expedient, cost beneficial at the time, which quite frankly came across to me as, let's try to do the cheapest way we can do this and still solve the problem, which isn't an unreasonable approach. Unfortunately, those efforts have not helped. And so we have come to a place now where it's a disaster. I shared pictures with everyone. You know what it looks like. And Councilmember Swank, you saw it as well. So therefore, it's in such bad shape. And by the way, the water lines, they had to bring it above ground at one point in 20. They had to bring it above ground, and ultimately they were able to bury it again on the other side of the path because they couldn't leave it where it was. And so now we're in a situation where we have to take more drastic measures in order to keep the bike path, in order to make the bike path whole and hopefully long-term. And that's costly. And talking to Director, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his name correctly.
Alabaja.
Yeah, I apologize. And in asking about mistakes made, mind you, this is over, what, an hour and a half, something like that, in the hot sun, and very hot sun. What I heard from him was that we cannot ascertain exactly what went wrong. There was a variety of different issues, including water line breaks, etc. Perhaps some things were missed, like the hillside seepage, but we can't ascertain for sure exactly what went wrong. And so therefore, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place in getting this fixed. Do you want to add to that, Councilmember Reisner?
No, I'm afraid if I start pontificating on it, we'll be here all night, so, no.
So I didn't say anything
No.
incorrect as far as you recall.
No, there's not a whole lot of point of going into
Rock formations?
rock formations
Okay.
and rotational forces, and you're right, it's a mess.
It's a mess.
But it's the type of mess as unfortunately is common in Athens County and within the city limits. Monticello is a perfect example. We've had other slips within the city. We've had huge boulders fall down on 4th Street. And it's basically all the same reason is that the soil is unstable, it moves when it's wet, and things collapse. Who's at fault? I don't know. I don't know if you really point the finger at any one person or one organization. It's just a combination of problems that were attempted to be fixed, but unfortunately the fixes didn't work. And you know, that happens in the real world. It'd be nice if we could foresee them and say, oh yeah, that's exactly what we need to do. But you can't, so.
Okay, Councilmember Swank, do you have any other questions?
So the reason I wanted to know the timeline, and I appreciate the way you've laid that out, is approximately in 2019, the things had to be moved. While we were doing that, we ran into some problems, some anticipated, some not. Some possible fixes were advanced, some fixes worked, some didn't. But we're now to the point where we need to take drastic measures. Oftentimes in construction projects, and I would call this a construction project, things like this come up, whether it's geological or a building or a structure. $650,000 is a lot of money. I'm having a great deal of difficulty voting in favor of that without first exploring through conversation and perhaps negotiation with the contractor concept called shared responsibility. It's worth a conversation. I'm not talking about pointing fingers. I'm not talking about litigation, but at least sitting down with the contractor. Because when this is fixed, and we all know it needs to be fixed, it would happen to be discovered that these were actually contractor errors. That's not the type of PR a contractor wants, to have others know that the city of Athens, or any city for that matter, had to spend upwards of $650,000 to fix a problem that might not have been their responsibility. So what I'm inclined to do tonight is to move to table this until said time that a conversation can be had with the contractor who executed the latest repairs to see if we can at least have a conversation. If they flat out refuses, they flat out refuses. But it's worth an offer. It's worth an offer to talk, and it's worth an offer to do a little bit more exploration. So that said, I would like to...
Mayor Patterson, let me get
Yes.
his comment first before you
Well,
move on that.
First of all, you know, to go through the design engineering, the construction engineering, we're not going to get there if this ordinance doesn't go through to begin those conversations. And those are administration conversations. That's where administration meets with the contractors. We have very specific things in the bid that goes forward for a contractor on a project like this. And that's where those negotiations come in. So it's an administrative function, and it's something that Director Alabaja, as well as our assistant engineer, Jessica Dine, will certainly be going through with the construction firms that put bids forward for this project.
But that's talking about the future. I'm talking about the firm that did the work. All construction companies have insurance policies to protect them. And there is a possibility. It may be a wild stretch, but there is a possibility when they look at this and see, because when's the last time they've been out here? When they look in this, see, and you know what, maybe we could have done this, and maybe we can help share in this cost with you. I'm not talking about the future. Yes, I agree with you 100%. It's not my place or any of the 7 of us to interview the new people that you're going to be bidding on. But we're talking about something that's happened in the past, and I would like to bring them back into the conversation so that we don't maybe have to spend $650 when maybe we only have to spend $500 or $450.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. But, you know, in talking with the Director of Engineering and Public Works and with Jessica Dine, they have scoured through and put together 7 years of data, 7 years of documentation. They've looked at the geotechs for this, multiple geotechs for this project. And at this point, I have full faith in the Director for Engineering and Public Works, as well as I do with our engineer, Jessica Dine, that they're not seeing error in what has happened with any of the previous work that has gone on in that location. There's quite a large gathering of documentation that was put together for a Councilmember Spielness, and I'm sure that we can share those documents too if you want to go through and look at them. But at this point, we're not seeing error for anyone who's put this project together. As Councilmember Reisner was just saying, you look at things that have happened in the city. We had to put together a pier wall, retaining wall on Columbia to preserve our sewer infrastructure up there, which was equally expensive, and it's because of things shifting, not radically and drastically, but things over time shifting. We lost an entire good portion of an apartment complex up off of Hooper some time ago. Unfortunately, that was poor geotax.
Yeah, I remember when that fell.
And the slip on Grosvenor as well.
Slip on
That had to
Grosvenor.
be repaired with CDBG funds. Do we have other comments or questions as some of this discussion is moving through? Councilmember Spielness.
Yeah, I want to add that, yes, it's in the contract that there's a $2 million liability insurance. There's also provisions in there that if there's a problem, that it is the responsibility of the city and, the construction company to try to find mitigating strategies to address the problems. But I am aware that there have been many conversations back and forth over this period of time to try to fix the problem repeatedly. And because I know I've contacted Jessica over the last couple of years and said, so what's happening? Well, we're having a meeting next week. Well, so what's happening? Well, we're having another meeting, whatever. So, I know that there's been multiple conversations. I think that's probably been done. But, I must say, Councilmember Swank, that I am deeply disappointed in the results of this. And apparently we can't really point fingers at it, but I know that if it was my house that was under construction and something like this happened, I certainly would not be happy about spending more money in this situation. But I think that based on everything that I have heard, I think we're kind of between a rock and literally between a rock and a place. And so I think we have to, I'm going to vote to move forward with this, as unhappy as I am about it, but I will say that any construction issue that comes up in the future, I will be much more diligent about questioning whether this should move forward or not. Part of me wonders if this would have been a good choice. So, anyway, that's my statement on it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. Thank you, Member Spielness, for doing your due diligence in the research of this, and Member Swank for putting thoughts to it as well. In terms of Member Swank's motion to table, I believe I also side with Member Spielness on not voting for that, partially because what I've heard, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but there's not an engineer, professional engineer, in the employ of the city, and I believe there are 3 currently, and another one was involved in reviewing this, has seen anything that shows negligence on the side of the contractor, and is asking us, from an engineering standpoint, to take a stand on how this is resolved. Of course, I don't want to spend this kind of money on fixing something, but as Member Reisner said, unfortunately these things do happen, and that money needs to be spent to protect the water line and the electric line. I also don't know if the bike path was never built, whether the slip could have occurred and that water line, electric line would also need to be protected. So that's my stance on this. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. And Councilmember Swank, I don't want to cut you off, but are you still thinking you're wanting to make a motion to table this?
No, I was inclined to. I did not make said motion.
Okay.
And hearing that there appears to be no desire or no factual information on which one would base that conversation, it would just be, I think, a waste of everybody's time. I will say this, though, and I agree. so vague. We need to take a lot closer look at what we're buying. We have, over the last, and I don't want to belabor the point, 4 or 5 years, had some projects that I just shake my head on. So I think going forward, we'll take a closer look. And I also would hope that the firm that did this particular thing isn't taken very seriously for this project, because I think they may be in over their head. That's all I have to say on the matter.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the comments and questions. All right. We'll move on to 7522. This is an ordinance authorizing final design of Project 313, renovation of the Armory, introduced by Councilmember Crowell. If no comments or questions, we will move on to 7622. This is an ordinance amending the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance. This is introduced by Councilmember Crowell. Any comments or questions? If none, we'll move on to 7722. This is an ordinance authorizing retroactive pay for the Chief Deputy Clerk in Athens County Municipal Court, introduced by Councilmember Crowell. And if no comments or questions, we will move on to 7822. This is an ordinance amending the auditor's 2022 staffing levels and compensation for the seasonal pool manager, authorized by Ordinance 14121, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee. And if no comments or questions, we'll move on to 7922, an ordinance authorizing a pay increase due to additional duties assigned to the position of Executive Administrator in the Auditor's Office, introduced by Councilmember Crowell. If no questions or comments, we will move on to the next one. Oh, we'll move on to ordinances for first reading. Oh, and Mayor Patterson.
President Isley, I know this is highly unusual. I just received a text moments ago from the fire chief, and there may have been a communication, a mix-up in communications, but he was asking that 6822 be suspended tonight, in that it'll put the fire department 2 weeks behind in terms of the testing for lieutenants for that staffing ordinance that speaks to the change in the structure for the fire department. And that they already have the dates set for administering that test. So is it possible to have council suspend 6822?
So if we don't suspend tonight, then it sets them behind for
By
what's
2
already
weeks.
been scheduled. This has been, well, we haven't moved on to the ordinances for first reading yet.
We haven't, so
So
at
probably,
this point, it was up for second.
and Finance and Personnel Committee, so Chair Crowell, are you amenable?
Thank you, President Isley. We have been back and forth discussing this issue with
Yep, we
the
have.
Service Safety Director. This is not news to me. There is some issues with the, I believe, the Ohio Revised Code and when positions become open, and it was unclear whether it was necessary. I believe it was a possibility that it was necessary, and we had a discussion about this council being very careful about suspending the rules for ordinances, but I am in support of amending and suspending the rules and passing 6822 tonight. Thank you, President Isaac.
Okay, and so are you
Second.
making a motion to suspend the rules, and given the reason that Mayor Patterson has said that our timeline is already set for the testing pattern? Okay.
Second.
All those in favor for suspending the rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the rules have been suspended. Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isaac. I'd like to make a motion to approve 6822.
Second.
Okay, and do we have any additional comments or questions? All right, all those in favor of approving ordinance 6822 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance has been approved.
Thank you, council.
I think we have one person watching TV tonight.
Okay. All right, we will now move on to ordinances for first reading. 8022 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for small city program funds for the 2022 solicitation cycle and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to read the pertinent section. The mayor or his designee is hereby authorized to submit an application and enter into agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for small city program funds. Applications are for constructions award during the state fiscal year 2026, July 1, 2025 through June 30, 2026.
Okay, and do we have any comments or questions on this funding opportunity? If none, Mayor Patterson, yes.
Just a clarification, because this came up in committee, and that was, one of the council members asked what the amount is for this particular project. Again, it's the Columbus Road project, and the way that the Director of Engineering and Public Works, as well as the Assistant Engineer, has viewed it, that we will do Columbus Road in phases, 3 phases to be exact. You can apply for up to $2 million under small cities, but I believe there's $11 million in that bucket, so there's not a lot of money there. So by doing this in phases, they will be asking somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 for the first phase. What I'm not clear on at this point in time is whether phase 1 is on the future hospital end of Columbus Road or elsewhere, and I can get that information for council in terms of exactly where phase 1 will take place. But this is, in my opinion, we've been very successful at getting ODOT grants and small cities, so it makes a lot of sense to phase this so that we are as competitive as possible with this project and phase it over a few years. But Columbus Road needs a lot of TLC.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, we'll move on to 8122, an ordinance authorizing the disposal of a mower at the water treatment plant, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. This is a very short one, pretty straightforward. Section 1 of the ordinance clarifies that this is a 2013 mower that is no longer needed by the water treatment plant, and this would be authorizing our service safety director to dispose of said equipment as a trade-in for a new mower.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? If not, we'll move on to 8222. This is an ordinance amending the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'll go ahead and read the pertinent section here. The 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 150-21 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums: $500 to the General Fund Law Director for a new computer, $10,000 to the Athens Enhancement Fund for the Athens Arts and Music Festival, and increasing the total appropriations by said amounts. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay.
Could I give a quick explanation as
Yeah.
far as my computer? I watched council from last week. I know people were amazed at the $500, but we already have money for a computer, but not enough for a computer that we need that's more than 500.
Oh, okay.
So the reason for this is we have additional body cams that are coming in, and the computer that our Secretary 2 uses can't process the body cams. It doesn't have enough memory, so it was an unexpected expense. So thank you.
Thanks for the explanation, Law Director Eliason. Okay. We'll move on to 8322, an ordinance providing for the issuance of not to exceed $9 million bonds by the City of Athens, Ohio, for the purpose of financing the costs of construction of a new fire station, making site improvements and acquiring furniture, equipment, and furnishings, and a site, therefore, and matters related thereto, and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. The document we have before us is a 10-page document, gets into great detail of the bonds, and I won't be reading the entire document. But I do want to, since this is, looking at an amount of $9 million, and it's very important for the city of Athens, I do want to read the whereases in section 1. Whereas this council of the city of Athens, Ohio, the municipality, has heretofore, by proper legislation, determined the necessity of constructing a new fire station, making site improvements, and acquiring furniture, equipment, and furnishings, and a site, therefore, the project, and whereas this council desires for financial costs of the project through the issuance of general obligation bonds pursuant to Chapter 133 of the Ohio Revised Code upon the terms provided herein, and whereas city auditor, as the fiscal officer of this municipality, has heretofore estimated that the life of the improvements constituting the project is at least 5 years, and certified that the maximum maturity of the bonds issued therefore is at least 20 years. Whereas this council, by ordinance number 152-21, passed December 13th, 2021, authorized an increase of 0.10% in the municipal income tax imposed by the municipality for the purpose of paying costs associated with the project for a period of 20 years from January 1, 2023 through December 31st, 2042, which was approved by the requisite majority vote of the electors of the municipality at the election held May 3rd, 2022. The municipal income tax and the proceeds of the municipal income tax are referred to herein as the municipal income tax proceeds. And whereas this council expects that principal and interest on such bonds will be paid from the municipal income tax proceeds, now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Athens, Ohio, section 1, that it is necessary to issue bonds of the municipality under authority of and pursuant to the general laws of the state of Ohio, particularly Chapter 133 of the Ohio Revised Code, in a principal amount not to exceed $9 million for the purpose of paying costs of the project, including financing costs, as defined in Section 133.01 of the Act, related to the issuance of the bonds. It is hereby determined that notes shall not be issued in anticipation of the bonds. And I welcome the rest of council to read carefully the remainder of this document. And but that is all that I believe is necessary for tonight. Thank you, President Reisler.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Swank?
In the second part of this, it says, "and acquiring furniture, equipment, and furnishings," and we know all those are going to cost money, and site. Do we have any idea what it's going to cost us for that land?
We do not.
Okay. Because that is Ohio University land.
It is.
Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Spielness?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I mentioned last week, I believe, that one of the concerns that people had about this was that it's, floodplain. And that I thought it was important as a public statement to assuage their concerns in that regard, that this isn't going to flood and it's going to be a reasonable place to put such a building, considering how heavy it's going to be with those ginormous fire trucks and everything. So I'm hoping for the public record that you can make such a statement or provide that information for us.
So what information are you asking?
So what I'm saying is that because there's, real concerns about this being built on a floodplain, a statement, information that makes people comfortable that this will be built in such a way that it's not going to sink and it's not going to flood and, that sort of, I'm trying to, I think that's a legitimate concern for people. And I think it would be helpful to make a statement about that.
Sure, well, I can certainly get a statement from our team and get that to council.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Reisner, did you have a comment? or a
No,
question?
she preempted me, so
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'll just sit here and be quiet.
After this
No other, do we have any other questions or comments?
assumption.
If none, we'll move on to the reading of 8422. This is an ordinance authorizing final design, engineering, and construction services for a new fire headquarters, project number 346, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Nisley. This is a timely follow-up to our recent ballot issue, and I will begin by reading from the ordinance. Whereas on May 3rd, 2022, the electorate of the City of Athens approved an increase in the city income tax pursuant to Ordinance 15221 for the purpose of providing funds for public safety, capital improvements, and equipment. Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, from Section 1, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into contracts for design, engineering, and construction services for a new fire headquarters, project number 346. Details in Section 2, the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance, Ordinance 150-21, is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the sum of $600,000 to General Fund Fire 101.208, Transaction Class 500, and increasing the total appropriations by said amount. Section 3, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to expend up to $670,000 from General Fund Fire 101.208, Transaction Class 500, for all costs to date associated with the said project. And as we just previously heard, we are talking about bonds in the amount of $9 million for these public safety capital improvements detailed in Section 4. And finally, Section 5, the ordinance shall be in full force and effect at the earliest moment permitted by law upon its passage and approval by the mayor.
Okay, any questions or comments? All right, if not, we've read all our ordinances for this evening, and would now move on to announcements on other business. Next week will be a council committee meeting night, and so if you have agenda items, either from council chairs or from the administration, to please have those to our clerk of council by Wednesday, so that we can get the agenda drawn up and issued to the public. And do we have any other announcements before we move on to our last few motions here? Yes, Councilmember Swank.
Just one quick one, more other business. I looked back through the ordinance we passed where we made provisions for all the street fairs and all that kind of stuff, and I may have missed it, but was bounty on the bricks on that list?
I believe that it was. We can go back and
I'll double check, yeah.
because the ordinance itself lists all the different events.
Okay, because I may have missed it because I just saw the tickets go on sale for that event June 1st, and if it's not on there, we need to move quickly so we can get the street closed down.
Do you happen to know where that was?
It'd be kind of a shock.
Do you happen to know where that would have been off the top of your head? Okay, I'll go back looking at it.
Okay, so yes, we would need to, because we'll need to pass it in June if that's
Yeah.
the case, and it would need to come, up through committee next week. All right, we have two other pieces of business, one of which is the motion to accept the April 2022 financial reports, which were issued to all members of council last week.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving, accepting these, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the financial reports have been accepted. The next is a motion to accept the April credit card transactions, which were also likewise distributed to all members of council. If we could have a motion for accepting these,
So moved.
and a second.
Seconded.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And those credit card transaction reports have been accepted. Then at the end now, we now have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that were not covered on the agenda. And if someone would like to speak, yes, if you come on up and just give us your name and your address, and if you're representing a group.
Yes, my name's Lenny Meyer, and we live on 89 South May Avenue. And more than anything, I want to thank you guys for your service. This is tedious but important work, sitting through a meeting. But I'm here to talk about business that you guys have already completed. I cannot, claim that ignorance is any excuse, but we just were not aware that our issue was before you when it was, and it was completed on April the 4th for a third reading. I'm here on behalf of my wife and some other neighbors. We've been residents of South May since 2012. One of the main reasons that we purchased the home we had is, I mean, it's a beautiful neighborhood, but there's an apartment in the back, and we viewed this as a great mother-in-law suite and a future home potentially for my daughter, who's disabled and will be with us forever. We knew that access to that alleyway, and this is what this is involving, behind our home had been closed off decades prior, and it goes all the way down to Hughes Moquin. Well, originally, and obviously they built there. We never thought that opening up that alleyway would be a potential, or we would have filed to get a permit that not occur long before. So we never applied for any special right-of-way before several months ago. So regarding Ordinance 3622 that was granted to us, we learned of this approval through a packet in the mail. Title 49 states that the request, the use for 89.5 South May was approved in accordance with the application. For the past few weeks, we've been trying to obtain clarification on the approval because it seems that council also approved another permit for the exact same plot of land. We believe the other permit was granted alongside it, and when I watch all the film on that, that's how it occurred, and that was for Mr. Kurt Monell to access a new building that he's proposing to build on South Shannon. We've spoken to both David Riggs and my wife has spoken to Mr. Swank several times, and we also have had a meeting on December 13th in our alley with Mr. Riggs. I was actually not there. My mother-in-law, the Ostrikes, Carol and John Simpson, the Cooks, all of the neighbors that are adjacent to this property, every one of them expressed that we did not want this to happen. Mr. Montel knows that we do not want this to happen, and Mr. Riggs also knows that we do not want this. I believe Mr. Swank should know that we, all of the neighbors adjacent, and I have a signed statement expressing that. It is not about parking for us or anything like that. If access would be granted, any car or truck would travel on a sidewalk just a few feet from my mother-in-law's front door. We put in a sidewalk. It serves as her front porch. It was built for foot traffic, not a car or a truck to be driving that close to somebody's front door. We really would appreciate if, well, we would have just liked to have, I guess, known that it was presented to council that there was no opposition to this. More concerning is that we just feel that it's unsafe and it's a bit disruptive. We were made aware of Mr. Montel's intention because a crew showed up before any of this was planned or approval was sought to tear down all of this barrier bush that was in the city's right-of-way. And they came in and just ripped that out. We then requested a meeting with the parties, and that meeting happened on December 13th. And that's the meeting I addressed where all of the neighbors were there to express disapproval of this.
Mr. Meyer,
yeah.
and you've got 3 minutes and you've got 3 seconds left right now.
Okay.
So if you can summarize, and then we'll address it.
We discussed these permits over the last couple of months without any awareness that there was opposition to granting that right-of-way. It was something we just never thought was going to be an issue. And we kind of don't understand why the front, there's plenty of frontage on South Shannon Street to access the property from there. We're not sure why this is necessary to go through the alley.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
We
sorry,
appre-
that was a
yeah,
lot.
No, that's okay, that's all right.
And, you know, and like I said, I can't claim, you know, we just were not aware that those were before council when they were. So
Right.
I would have been here 6 weeks ago talking about that. Or,
Okay.
yeah, and I guess more than anything, I just want to know what steps we can take since
Right.
you guys have already approved.
Well, we
both
appreciate
of
your
these.
coming forward. And to give a very brief answer, and we'll not get involved in discussion now, really, tonight, but we have checked with the law director, and the ordinance came through council. So if it's for it to be reconsidered, it would have to come back through council again, which means it would follow the same process as any other ordinance where it comes through committee first. And the committee then decides if they're willing to hear it. So it came through planning. It would go through Councilmember Grace's committee to come back on as an item for discussion. I will share with you that we do have a memo from the code director saying they've reviewed the site and they maintain there is room in the alley for both uses to be accommodated, and the code director did share that memo with us. So that will be an item, for the Planning and Development Committee to decide if they want to bring that forward for hearing it again. And if they do, then it could come up at a future committee meeting. And so that would be the route that it would take. You'd have to have another committee, ordinance,
Okay.
3 readings of an ordinance if you were interested in pursuing, and if the Planning and Development Committee is interested in pursuing rescinding that.
Okay.
It's a lengthy process like the other one was,
Sure.
but that's how every ordinance moves through, that we have the
Sure,
committee
but
meeting
so-
discussion first and then 3 readings.
Okay. I guess my confusion and is just, we don't understand how both parties could be accommodated in this piece of land.
Okay.
So the usage of that, like, as it's written right now, like, I mean, the map is even unclear. Like, if we were to, which we were approved to park a car there, if we were to park a car there and they're trying to come through, or there's a utility pole in the way. I mean, there's a lot of things that are, and the way this has been going, we've been finding out after the fact, so.
Sure.
We don't want construction trucks to start driving through basically our front.
Sure.
You know,
It does,
feet
it
outside of
does
our front
further
door.
state there's an existing utility pole that will be relocated by the owner at 70 South Shannon. I believe the ordinance that was passed also makes reference to if the car is moved forward far enough, is some of the language that I remember in the ordinances. What I will do is make sure that we provide you with a copy of both of those ordinances as they were passed.
Oh, no,
You
yeah,
have
we
the full
have.
text of it?
We have that, and I
Okay.
have, what was shown to us, again, with the disputed place that both, and we just can't make sense of this diagonal line. And I guess the other thing is we can't really make sense of the precedent that it could be establishing. I know that neighbors further down the alley are quite concerned that now it's like, okay, well, what's stopping this from saying like, okay, well, the Lockman address down at the end wants, if somebody wants to keep going through. I know they've expressed concern, others have expressed concern that I've heard about. Sorry, I shouldn't be referencing anybody, but in regards of the alleyway
Sure.
continuing to be developed, I just don't know what precedent this has had
Okay.
in the past for a paper alleyway like this to be opened up.
Well, we appreciate you coming forward tonight.
Thank you.
And expressing your concerns, and we have a route a process that we follow, and so we can let you know if we're going to decide to take that up again in
Okay.
committee.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or any other persons who are here tonight who want to make an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes? They can do so. Okay. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, I imagine. We're adjourned at 8:17 PM. Thank you so much.